A brilliant lawyer and a cold attorney were forced to share the same desk while competing for the only promotion at the firm, capable of changing their lives forever. Today, you'll meet Madeline and Lucas, who couldn't stand each other and turned a coffee table into a real courtroom of disputes. But before we start this story, tell me here in the comments, have you ever had to compete for a promotion at work? Enjoy the story, everyone. The glass of water flew in slow motion. Madeline Crawford watched the liquid cross the air and land directly on Lucas Whitfield. She composed the most innocent expression from her repertoire. Oops, sorry. The glass slipped. Lucas was paralyzed for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds in which Madeline could savor every fragment of that small victory. The co-working space around them continued functioning normally. Professionals typing on laptops, phones ringing in the distance, nobody noticing that a war had just been declared at that tiny workstation in the corner of the room. Slipped, he repeated, looking at the stain spreading. Of course it slipped. Accidents happen, she replied, turning her eyes back to the computer screen with a little smile she didn't bother to hide. Lucas took a deep breath, counted mentally to 10, then to 20. He picked up his glass of orange juice, the one he had ordered less than 5 minutes ago at the Space's cafeteria, and examined the orange liquid with an unsettling calm. Madeline realized too late. The juice hit her like an abstract work of art being created live. Stains that definitely wouldn't come out with soap and water. Oops, Lucas said with the same tone she had used. Sorry, the glass slipped. You didn't do that. Accidents happen. Her eyes sparked. His gleamed with satisfaction. And that's how the first day of Madeline Crawford and Lucas Whitfield, sharing a workstation of less than a meter at Workspace Central, Chicago's busiest co-working space, began. 4 hours earlier, neither of them imagined the day would end like this. The morning had started with champagne. The Williams, O'Brien & Associates firm had won a nationally prominent case, a corporate dispute that involved months of work and risky strategies. The phones wouldn't stop ringing with new interested clients. Madeline was at the office when the senior partners called a general meeting. She walked to the conference room with the posture of someone who already knew she deserved recognition. Lucas arrived from the other hallway. They locked eyes at the room's door. Neither yielded passage. Ladies first, he said. Then go ahead, she replied without hesitation. A colleague who was behind them had to step aside to avoid passing between the two. Richard Williams, founding partner, began his speech congratulating the entire team. He spoke about dedication, excellence, and the firm's bright future. Madeline listened attentively, waiting for the moment when her name would be mentioned. And that's why, Williams continued, we've decided this is the right time to announce something important. A partnership position will open in the coming months. The air in the room became denser. Madeline felt her heart race. Beside her, she noticed Lucas straighten his posture, almost imperceptibly. The lawyer who stands out the most during this period will be invited to join the partners of this firm. Madeline didn't look at Lucas. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what he was thinking, because she was thinking the same thing. That position had her name written on it. And he certainly believed it had his name. The meeting was interrupted by a maintenance worker. There was a problem with the building's electrical system. Something about old wiring and safety regulations. The office would need to be evacuated for an emergency renovation that would last at least 2 weeks. We've secured an emergency partnership with Workspace Central, Williams announced. Everyone will work at the co-working space during the renovation period. However, due to the number of employees and the limited availability of space, some people will need to share workstations. Ms. Collins will distribute the assignments. Margaret Collins, executive assistant, began circulating with a list. Madeline waited until her name was called. Crawford and Whitfield, Margaret said, looking at the clipboard. You've been assigned to Station 27. Shared. The two of us? Madeline asked. In the same space? Lucas completed. Exactly. Margaret replied with an expression suggesting she knew exactly what she was doing. I'm sure you'll be able to adapt. For how long? Madeline insisted. Until the renovation is finished. And that's how Madeline found herself sitting less than half a meter away from the man she hated most in all of Chicago's legal universe. The rivalry between them wasn't news. It had started 3 years earlier, when both entered the firm the same week and were assigned to the same case. What should have been a promising partnership turned into a fierce competition that almost compromised the entire process. Since then, the partners made a point of keeping them on separate projects. Until now. Station 27 was a nightmare. A narrow counter with 2 cramped chairs, a single power outlet they had to fight over, and a low divider that offered no privacy. The noise of the co-working space was constant, but nothing compared to the silent tension between the two. "Are you going to stare at me all day, or do you plan to work?" Madeline asked, opening her laptop. "I was just admiring how you managed to occupy 3/4 of the counter with your things. Maybe if you didn't bring physical folders like we were in 1990, there would be more space. Some of us prefer traditional methods. Some of us prefer efficiency." Madeline went to the co-working cafeteria and came back with a glass of water. Lucas had ordered an orange juice. They worked in silence for almost an hour, the sound of keys and occasional sighs filling the space between them. That's when the water slipped, and the juice flew in retaliation. And 2 weeks of forced coexistence began. At the end of that first day, while Madeline was putting away her things, she noticed something strange. A messenger had entered the co-working earlier, delivering a brown envelope to Margaret Collins, who was in a reserved room in the back. The partners had exchanged meaningful looks before putting away the envelope without explanations. Madeline frowned. There was something happening that she couldn't identify. But at that moment, her priority was surviving the next 2 weeks. The partner position could wait until tomorrow. The war against Lucas Whitfield, on the other hand, was just beginning. Lucas Whitfield was smiling, and that could only mean one thing: trouble. Madeline observed her rival from the other side of the counter, phone to his ear, closing what seemed to be an important deal. She recognized that tone of voice, the cadence of someone about to land a big client. When he hung up, he didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. "I just closed a quarterly consulting contract with Henderson Industries." "Congratulations," Madeline replied without taking her eyes off the computer. "I closed the early renewal with Davies 20 minutes ago, but I didn't find it necessary to announce it." Lucas tilted his head. "Davies? The one who was considering going to the competition?" "That's the one. Sometimes all it takes is a well-structured proposal and a bit of competence." Interesting choice of words, a bit of competence. "I calibrate according to the audience." He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Margaret Collins, who appeared beside the station with her usual clipboard. "Mr. Williams requested a detailed report of your activities, tasks completed, methods applied, results obtained, deadline by noon tomorrow." "That's not standard procedure," Madeline observed. "It is now," Margaret replied, and walked away without giving explanations. The two remained silent for a moment. "They're evaluating us," Lucas said quietly. "Brilliant deduction. I'm trying to be collaborative here. And I'm trying to work. One of us is succeeding." Lucas sighed and returned to his screen. Madeline allowed herself a small smile of victory. The following morning brought a surprise. Mr. O'Brien showed up at the co-working space without warning, circulating between the stations like someone doing a casual inspection. When he reached Station 27, he stopped. "How is the experience of sharing the space going?" "Educational," Madeline replied. "Revealing," Lucas added. O'Brien looked from one to the other. "Revealing how?" "I discovered that some people still print documents in the middle of the 21st century, Madeline said, indicating Lucas's folders with a subtle gesture. "And I discovered that some people type so loudly they seem to be trying to drill through the keyboard," Lucas countered. "Speed and efficiency tend to make noise. Noise and results are different things." O'Brien wrote something in his notebook. "Very interesting," he murmured and walked away. When he was out of hearing range, Lucas turned to Madeline. "You just criticized me in front of a partner. I made an observation about work methods. If you felt criticized, perhaps it's time to update your methods. Or perhaps it's time for you to learn that not everything needs to be a competition." That coming from the man who announced his contract like he was raising a flag. "I shared good news, you turn it into a dispute." "No, I just put it in context." Lucas stared at her for a long moment. There was something in his look that she couldn't decipher. Irritation, certainly, but also something that seemed almost like admiration. "You're impossible," he finally said. "Thank you. I try hard." In the middle of the afternoon, both were called for a video conference with Williams. The connection was bad, and they ended up sharing the same meeting room, each at one end of the table, looking at the same screen. "I want to know how you evaluate each other's performance," Williams said without beating around the bush. Silence. "Crawford, you start." Madeline took a deep breath. The temptation to destroy Lucas was enormous, but she was too smart to fall for that obvious trap. "Mr. Whitfield is a competent professional. His methods are different from mine, but he delivers consistent results." Lucas couldn't hide his surprise. "Whitfield, your turn." "Miss Crawford is extremely capable. We disagree on practically everything, but I can't deny that she knows what she's doing." Williams nodded slowly. "Interesting. You can get back to work." The screen went black. Madeline and Lucas looked at each other. "That was a test," she said. "Obviously." "Do you think we passed?" "I think we still don't know what the rules of the game are." When they returned to the station, Madeline noticed Williams talking to a man she didn't recognize. They were speaking quietly, but one phrase reached her. "The results from the other state arrive tomorrow. We need to analyze them before deciding." "Other state?" She looked at Lucas, who had also heard. The same confused look. At the end of the day, a messenger delivered another brown envelope to the partners' reserved room. Through the glass, Madeline saw Williams read the contents and show them to O'Brien. The two exchanged serious looks before putting away the papers. "How many envelopes have there been?" Lucas asked. "That's the third one I've counted." "And no explanation?" "None." They remained silent, watching the partners through the glass. "Do you think this competition is just between the two of us?" Lucas asked. Madeline didn't answer. For the first time, she felt there was something happening behind the scenes that they couldn't see. That night, as she left the co-working space, she passed by Margaret Collins, who was talking on the phone. A single phrase reached her ears. "Yes, the reference material arrived. Nobody knows who produced it." Madeline stopped, but Margaret had already hung up and disappeared down the hallway. The document had no name. None. Zero. Nothing. Madeline turned the last page of the report for the third time, looking for any identification. That material was brilliant, a legal analysis so well structured that she herself would be proud to sign it. But someone had forgotten that small detail. Or perhaps it wasn't an oversight. She was at Mr. Patterson's office, an important client on the other side of town, when his assistant handed her the folder. "Your firm sent this as reference for the meeting. Excellent material, I must say." Madeline flipped through the pages with growing confusion. She didn't recognize the style. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Lucas's. It wasn't from any colleague she knew. "Who prepared this report?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I can't say. It came directly from the partners. They only said it was from someone on the team." Someone on the team. But who? 2 hours later, Madeline was back at the co-working space, the mysterious report inside her bag. Lucas was already at Station 27, apparently focused on something on the computer. "Do you know this material?" she asked bluntly, placing the document in front of him. Lucas examined the pages for a few seconds. "Never seen it before. Why?" "It was used as reference in a meeting of mine today. Nobody knows who wrote it. And you're asking me because you think it was me?" "I'm asking because it's an official document from our firm without any signature. Doesn't that seem strange to you?" Lucas flipped through a few more pages. "It's competent work," he admitted, "but it's not my style. Too conservative in the conclusions." "Conservative?" "I would have been more aggressive in the argumentation. Whoever wrote this plays it too safe." Madeline took the document back. "Interesting. I thought exactly the opposite." "Which would be what? That I play it too safe?" "That you've never met a conclusion you didn't want to exaggerate." Lucas smiled. That irritating smile she was beginning to know too well. Was that a criticism or a professional observation? "You can choose whichever you prefer." Before he could respond, Madeline's phone rang. It was Margaret Collins. "Crawford, Whitfield, you both need to go to Mr. Harrington's office in 40 minutes. He's unhappy with how the case is progressing and wants explanations." "Both of us?" Madeline asked. The case has elements from both your areas. Williams wants you to present a united front." The call ended. Madeline looked at Lucas. "Is Harrington your client or mine?" "Technically, the firm's, but I brought him in, and I structured the case strategy. So it looks like we're going to have to pretend we can stand each other for a few hours. I don't know if my acting ability is that good." Theodore Harrington's office was in an imposing building in the financial district. The man was known for being demanding, impatient, and extremely difficult to please. When Madeline and Lucas entered the room, he didn't even get up to greet them. "I want to know why my case has been stalled for 2 weeks." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but Madeline was faster. "Mr. Harrington, the case isn't stalled, it's in a phase of strategic consolidation. Each day of apparent inactivity is in fact preparation for a stronger move." Harrington narrowed his eyes. "That sounds like a sophisticated excuse for inertia." "With all due respect," Lucas intervened, "if we wanted to make excuses, we would have chosen something less elaborate. The truth is that cases like yours require precision. Hasty moves can cost more than strategic patience." Madeline almost looked at Lucas with surprise. It was exactly what she would have said. "And how much longer will this strategic patience last?" Harrington asked. "Less than you imagine," Madeline replied. "We're finalizing an approach that will change the course of the dispute." "Where?" Harrington looked from one to the other. "I thought you two couldn't stand each other." Silence. "Where did you get that idea?" Lucas asked. "I heard comments. The legal market is small." Madeline and Lucas looked at each other. For a fraction of a second, something passed between them. A silent understanding. "You know how rumors are," Madeline said softly. "People love to create narratives where none exist." "Exactly," Lucas completed. "Actually, we work very well together. Our differences in style are complementary." "Complementary," Harrington repeated, clearly skeptical. "I bring the creativity," Lucas said, "and I bring the structure," Madeline completed. "Together we cover all the angles." Harrington observed them for a long moment. Then, for the first time since they entered, something like a smile appeared on his face. "Did you rehearse this?" "No," both answered at the same time, and this time it was true. The meeting lasted another hour. At some point, without either of them noticing exactly when, the answers began to complement each other naturally. Lucas would start a sentence, Madeline would finish it, she would present an argument, he would reinforce it with examples. When they left the building, the sun was already setting. "That was," Lucas began. "Strange," Madeline completed. "I was going to say efficient." It was also strange. They walked in silence for a few meters. "That report without a signature?" Lucas said suddenly. "Don't you think it's odd that nobody knows who wrote it?" "I'm trying not to think about it." "Why?" "Because every time I think about it, I reach conclusions that don't make sense." "Like?" Madeline stopped and looked at him. "Like the possibility of someone working on firm cases that we don't even know about." Lucas fell silent. The same idea had clearly crossed his mind. "That would be," he began. "Unlikely," she cut in, "but not impossible." That night, Madeline reread the mysterious report once more. On the last page, almost invisible in the lower corner, there was a single word she hadn't noticed before. A code, or perhaps an initial. The letter B. The letter B. Madeline spent the entire night thinking about that mysterious initial. Now, standing in the O'Hare Airport lobby with a rolling suitcase, she watched Lucas approach with a coffee in hand and the calm of someone who hadn't spent hours analyzing an unsigned document. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Wonderfully. You?" "Perfectly." Both were lying, and both knew it. Williams had called the night before. An important client in New York needed urgent in-person service, and the complexity of the case required complementary knowledge. Translation: Madeline and Lucas would have to work together outside of Chicago. "At least we'll have more space than at Station 27, Lucas commented as they entered the boarding line. "A jail cell would have more space than Station 27. "Are you comparing our work environment to a prison?" "I'm making an architectural observation." The flight passed in productive silence. Madeline reviewed documents, Lucas made notes. Professionalism in its purest form. When they landed at LaGuardia, the designated driver was nowhere to be found. "The organization of this trip is impeccable," Madeline observed, looking at her phone with no signal. "Maybe it's a test of adaptability, or of patience." In that case, you've already lost. You've been complaining since we landed. Making pertinent observations isn't complaining. It's stating facts. They shared a taxi. Traffic turned 20 minutes into almost 2 hours. At some point between the Triborough Bridge and downtown Manhattan, the silence began to feel heavy. "What do you think that letter on the report means?" Lucas asked. Madeline considered not answering, but curiosity won. It could be an initial. It could be an internal code. It could be a formatting error. You don't believe it's an error, no, do you? Me neither. Someone wanted to leave a mark without leaving a signature. Why? That's the right question. The client was Richard Donovan, a businessman with a reputation for turning lawyers into former lawyers when he didn't like the results. An old contractual error had resurfaced on the eve of an important merger. "Explain how this happened," Donovan demanded. "Mr. Donovan," Madeline replied, "the origin of the error is less relevant than its correction. We can investigate responsibilities later. Now we need focus." "Focus on what exactly?" "On ensuring this merger happens," Lucas completed. "The error exists. The solution does too. The difference between success and failure is the time it takes us to go from one to the other." Donovan studied them for a moment. "Do you two always finish each other's sentences?" "No," both answered simultaneously. The meeting stretched for hours. Clauses were reviewed, risks were mapped, solutions were built. At some point, Madeline realized she had stopped fighting against Lucas and started working with him. It was unsettling. During a break, while Donovan took a call, Lucas approached. Page 43, the termination clause. Madeline located the section. "What about it?" "The wording allows for ambiguous interpretation. If the other party has competent lawyers, they'll exploit it." She reread it. He was right. "How did you identify that?" "I read the entire contract, twice." "When?" "On the plane, while you were pretending not to watch me." "I wasn't watching you. You looked in my direction 14 times. I was looking out the window." "You were in the aisle seat." Madeline had no answer for that. The correction was made in time. Donovan signed the documents with something like satisfaction. "I must admit I'm impressed. Your synergy is remarkable." "Thank you," Madeline said. "We work well under pressure." Separately, Lucas added. "In parallel," she corrected. "In the same general direction," he concluded. "Accidentally," she finished. Donovan raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. At the hotel that night, Madeline received a message from Margaret Collins. Brief and enigmatic. Urgent envelope arrived. Partners meeting early tomorrow. She was rereading the message when she heard a knock on the door. Lucas in the hallway was holding her pen. "You dropped this at the reception." "Thank you." He didn't leave. She didn't close the door. "Did you get Margaret's message?" he asked. "About the envelope?" "That one." "I did. Do you think it's related to the report?" "I think it's related to a lot of things we're not seeing." The hallway was silent. The distance between them seemed to have decreased without either of them moving. "Today was different," Madeline said. "It was. We worked well together. Strangely well." "Does that bother you?" Lucas thought for a moment. "More than I expected." "Why?" "Because it would be easier if you were just unbearable." "And I'm not?" "Not just that." Madeline felt something shift in the air between them. Something that didn't have a name yet. "Good night, Whitfield." "Good night, Crawford." The door closed. Madeline stood in the same place for a long moment, processing a conversation that seemed to have said much more than the words suggested. In the next room, Lucas looked at the wall that separated them, doing exactly the same thing. The next morning, when they met at the hotel cafe, neither mentioned the previous night's conversation. But when their eyes met for a second longer than necessary, both knew that something had changed. 11 at night. Still in New York. Still waiting. Madeline stared at the hotel lobby ceiling, as if the answers to all her questions were hidden among the decorative moldings. Beside her, Lucas flipped through the same magazine for what seemed to be the 10th time. Donovan had promised a final answer by 9. 2 hours late, the two lawyers remained stuck in professional limbo. "Do you think he's making us wait on purpose?" Madeline asked. "Probably. It's a negotiation tactic." "Against his own lawyers?" "Some clients like to remind people who pays the bills." The lobby was almost empty. Just a bored receptionist and a guest asleep in an armchair. The hotel bar had closed at 10. "I would love a coffee right now," Madeline murmured. There's a vending machine on the second floor. How do you know that? I walked the hallways while you were on the phone with Margaret. Nighttime hotel exploration. Interesting hobby. I have many layers, Crawford. I'm starting to notice. Lucas stood up. I'm gonna get coffee. You want some? Madeline hesitated. Accepting coffee from Lucas Whitfield seemed like a dangerous precedent. Black. No sugar. Why am I not surprised? He returned 10 minutes later with 2 steaming cups. The coffee was terrible, but hot. At that moment, it was enough. Thank you, Madeline said, and for the first time it sounded genuine. You're welcome. They drank in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Can I ask you a personal question? Madeline finally said. Depends on the level of personal. Why law? Lucas raised an eyebrow. That's personal? For some people, yes. Career choice says a lot about who we are. He looked at the coffee as if the answer were inside it. My father worked in a factory, 30 years in the same place. One day, they fired him without warning, without proper compensation, without explanation. What happened? Nothing. He didn't have the resources to fight, didn't know anyone who could help. He just accepted it. And you decided that wouldn't happen to other people. Something like that. And you? Madeline took a deep breath. My mother. She had a small business, a bakery. The landlord decided to triple the rent overnight. She lost everything. No legal recourse, with options she didn't know existed. I found out about it years later in college. Too late. Lucas nodded slowly. So we're both here for the same reason, to prevent others from going through what our families went through. It seems so, he smiled, a genuine smile without irony. You're not what I expected, Crawford. What did you expect? Someone less human. And you're not what I expected either. Which would be someone less understandable. Lucas tilted his head. Understandable? It's the best word I could find. Should I feel complimented? You can interpret it however you want. His eyes met hers. The air seemed to grow denser. The empty lobby suddenly seemed smaller. Madeline, he said, and it was the first time he used her first name. Lucas. The distance between them had decreased without either noticing. Madeline could feel his warmth, see the details of the face she had never observed up close. He leaned in. She didn't pull back. Lucas's phone rang. The moment shattered. He looked at the screen, frowned, and read the message in silence. His expression changed. What is it? Madeline asked. A message from Margaret about important developments out of state. What kind of developments? It doesn't specify, just that the partners are satisfied with the results. Madeline felt something freeze inside her. Out of state. They were out of state. Did you know anything about this? She asked, her tone colder. No. Why would I? Because the message came to you, not to me. Lucas looked confused, or pretended very well. That's strange. It's more than strange, it's convenient. What are you insinuating? That maybe this whole trip was more strategic than I imagined. You think I planned this? You were very collaborative, very friendly. The word came out like an accusation. Lucas stepped back, his expression hardening. A moment ago we were talking like normal people. Now you think it was all manipulation? I don't know what to think. Clearly. The silence that followed was completely different from the previous one. Heavy. Cutting. Maybe it's better if we wait for Donovan's answer separately, Madeline said. Maybe it is. She stood up and walked toward the elevator. Halfway there, she stopped. If you're playing on 2 fronts, Lucas, I'll find out. And if I'm not? Madeline didn't answer. The elevator door closed between them. In the lobby, Lucas stood looking at the empty space where she had been. The message still glowed on his phone screen. He reread the words. Important developments out of state, something didn't make sense. The flight back to Chicago was the quietest in the history of commercial aviation. Madeline sat by the window. Lucas in the aisle. 3 empty seats between them like a no-man's land that neither dared to cross. 2.5 hours of absolute silence, broken only by the sound of the beverage cart. When they landed, each grabbed their suitcase and left without a word. The next morning, Madeline arrived at the co-working space before everyone else. Deliberate strategy. The less time sharing space with Lucas, the better. She dove into work with an almost desperate intensity, accepting 3 new cases before noon. Crawford. O'Brien's voice made her look up. Sir? I heard you took on the Pemberton case. I did. Any problem? Whitfield also expressed interest in it. He expressed interest after I had already accepted it. Are you sure? Absolutely. O'Brien wrote something in his eternal notebook and walked away without further explanation. 15 minutes later, Lucas appeared at Station 27. He looked at Madeline. She looked at him. No greeting. Pemberton was mine, he said simply. Pemberton belongs to whoever gets there first. I spoke with him last week. Talking isn't signing a contract. You knew I was working on this. I'm not obligated to monitor your schedule. Lucas sat in his chair with more force than necessary. Great, so that's how it's going to be. How? Open war. It was always war. You were just distracted. The provocation hit its mark. Lucas opened his laptop and began typing with an intensity that suggested each key was an enemy to be defeated. The following days were brutal. Madeline and Lucas began competing over absolutely everything. Clients, meeting rooms, time slots with the partners, even the last coffee from the pot. It was exhausting and absurd, but neither could stop. Crawford, you reserved the conference room for 3 o'clock? Margaret asked. I did. Whitfield also reserved it, at the same time. Impossible. The system doesn't allow duplicates. The system had a glitch. You're both scheduled. Madeline and Lucas looked at each other from across the room. I reserved first, she said. I have a client meeting, he replied. I also have a client meeting. Then one of us will have to give in. I agree. You can start. Margaret sighed. You have 10 minutes to resolve this. After that, I'll flip a coin. She walked away, leaving the two at an impasse. How important is your meeting? Lucas asked. Maximum. And yours? Equally maximum. How convenient. It's not convenience. It's fact. They stared at each other for a long moment. Beneath the anger, there was something more. Something neither wanted to acknowledge. We can split the room, Madeline finally suggested. Half the time each. That would require cooperation. I know, it's horrible, but it's practical. Lucas considered. 1 hour each, 1 hour each. Who gets the first time slot? Rock, paper, scissors? You're kidding. Got a better idea? He didn't. Madeline won. Lucas got the second hour. That was luck, he said. That was strategy. You always choose rock. How do you know that? I pay attention. The phrase hung in the air for a second longer than comfortable. That afternoon, Williams called a brief meeting with the entire team. Brief meant 15 minutes of generalities and one sentence that made everyone stop. The evaluation results are being compiled. The decision about the partner position will be announced soon. Madeline looked at Lucas. He looked at her. For the first time in days, there was something besides hostility in the look. There was fear. After the meeting, O'Brien approached Station 27. How is the adaptation to the shared space going? Productive, Madeline replied. Challenging, Lucas added. Interesting. You're both having impressive performances lately, almost as if you were competing for something. Silence. But I imagine it's just natural dedication, O'Brien continued with a half smile. After all, you're exemplary professionals. He walked away before either could respond. He knows, Madeline whispered. Of course he knows. They've been watching us from the beginning. Do you think this is part of the evaluation? Putting two candidates in a tiny space and seeing who survives sounds exactly like the kind of thing Williams would do. At the end of the day, another envelope arrived. Madeline saw Margaret receive it and take it directly to the partner's reserved room. Through the glass, she saw Williams open it, read it, and show it to O'Brien. The two exchanged serious looks. How many envelopes have there been? Lucas asked beside her. I lost count. What do you think is in them? I don't know, but every time one arrives, the partners get stranger. They watched in silence as Williams put the envelope in a locked drawer. Madeline, Lucas said quietly. It was the second time he used her first name. She felt a shiver. What? About New York. I don't want to talk about New York. I know, but I need you to know that I wasn't playing games. That conversation was real. Madeline didn't respond. She didn't trust her own voice. You don't have to believe me. He continued, but it was important that I said it. He returned to his computer, leaving her with words she didn't know how to process. That night, while gathering her things to leave, Madeline noticed something. The drawer where Williams had stored the envelope was slightly open, and inside, partially visible, there was a name she didn't recognize. Oliver Blackwood. Oliver Blackwood. Madeline repeated the name mentally all night long. Who was Oliver Blackwood? She knew all the lawyers at the firm. All of them. And that name didn't exist anywhere in her memory. The next morning, she arrived at the co-working space determined to investigate. But before she could do anything, Williams called a general meeting. "I want to congratulate the team on the brilliant strategy in the Whitmore case," he announced. The approach was innovative and extremely effective. Madeline frowned. "Whitmore case?" She hadn't worked on that case. She looked at Lucas, who seemed equally confused. "Mr. Williams," Lucas raised his hand. "Who developed that strategy?" "The team," Williams replied vaguely. "What's important is the result." "But specifically?" "Specifically, the firm won. That's what matters." The meeting ended without further clarification. Madeline and Lucas returned to Station 27 with the same question in their eyes. The cramped counter had never seemed so small. Madeline pretended to type a report, her fingers moving over the keys in a convincing rhythm. But on the screen, she had opened a notepad. She typed just one sentence. "Who is Oliver Blackwood?" She slid the laptop slightly to the side, positioning the screen where Lucas could see it. He stopped typing immediately. His eyes scanned the words. No visible reaction, but Madeline noticed the tension in his shoulders. Without saying anything, Lucas opened his physical folder, the one she criticized so much for being outdated. He flipped through some documents until he found one that mentioned results in another state. With a pen, he discreetly circled the city of origin, Denver. Madeline nodded almost imperceptibly. Lucas closed the folder. No words were exchanged, none needed to be. Later that day, O'Brien appeared for one of his increasingly frequent visits. "How are your cases going?" "Progressing," Madeline replied. "Well underway," Lucas added. "Excellent. By the way, I received interesting feedback from Mr. Harrington. He mentioned that you work well as a team." "It was a specific situation," Madeline said quickly. "Circumstantial," Lucas completed. O'Brien smiled in a way that seemed to know more than he was saying. "Interesting how you always use the same words." He wrote something in his notebook and walked away. "Why does he write everything down?" Lucas asked quietly. "Because we're being evaluated on every detail, every word, every reaction." "That's comforting." It wasn't meant to be. At lunchtime, Madeline went down to the building's cafeteria. In line, she ran into Thomas Reed, a junior lawyer who worked at the Boston branch. "Crawford, long time." "Reed, what brings you to Chicago?" "Meeting with the partners. Administrative stuff." "I see. By the way, I heard about the case our people solved in Denver. Impressive." Madeline kept her expression neutral, but inside her heart raced. "Denver? Yeah, that complex intellectual property case. One of our lawyers spent weeks there. Apparently, it was an important victory." "Which lawyer?" "I don't know the name I just heard comments. Someone from the main office, I think." Denver, the same city Lucas had circled. Madeline returned to the station with her mind racing. She sat down and opened the notepad again. Reed confirmed, Denver. Weeks of work, nobody knows who. Lucas read over her shoulder, pretending to look for something on his own desk. "First the unsigned report," he murmured almost inaudibly. "Then the envelopes, now Denver. And a name nobody knows." Before they could continue, Margaret appeared with a serious expression. "Crawford Whitfield, the partners want to see you, now." The meeting room was strangely formal, Williams sitting on one side, O'Brien on the other, two empty chairs waiting for them. "Sit down," Williams indicated. They obeyed. "It has come to our attention that you've been asking questions about internal firm matters." Williams began. "Questions?" Madeline kept her tone neutral. "About cases, about colleagues, about information that doesn't directly concern you. We were just—" "Curiosity is an admirable quality," O'Brien interrupted. "In moderate doses. In excess, it can be counterproductive." The veiled threat hung in the air. "You're both excellent professionals," Williams continued. "We wouldn't want distractions to affect your performance. Especially now." "Especially now?" Lucas asked. "The decision about the partnership will be announced soon. It would be a shame if noise interfered with the evaluation." Madeline felt a chill down her spine. This wasn't just a warning. It was an order to stop investigating. "Understood," she said. "Perfectly clear," Lucas added. Williams smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Great, you can get back to work." In the hallway, Madeline and Lucas walked in silence until they were far enough away. They know we're suspicious, she whispered. More than that, they want us to stop. Which means there's something to find. The question is it worth the risk? Madeline thought about the name. Oliver Blackwood, the envelopes, Denver, everything that didn't make sense. Maybe it's better to focus on what we can control, she finally said. Lucas nodded, but there was something in his eyes that said otherwise. That night, as she was leaving the co-working space, Madeline saw Williams in a video conference. The screen was partially visible through the glass. A man she didn't recognize, and in the lower corner of the screen, a name. O. Blackwood. O. Blackwood. The face on the screen wouldn't leave Madeline's mind, but she didn't have time to process it. The next morning, chaos began before the coffee even got cold. Crawford, the Pemberton contract has an error in the confidentiality clause, Margaret announced, appearing at Station 27 with an expression that promised nothing good. Madeline felt her stomach sink. Error? What kind of error? The kind that the client noticed before we did. She took the document from Margaret's hands and read it. There it was, clear as day. A typing error that completely changed the meaning of an entire clause. Confidentiality for 5 years had turned into 5 months. That's impossible. I reviewed it 3 times. Apparently that wasn't enough times. Lucas, who had watched the scene in silence, had the wisdom not to comment, at least for 30 seconds. It happens to everyone, he finally said. Thanks for the solidarity. Very comforting. I was being sincere, and I was being sarcastic. The day didn't improve. 2 hours later, it was Lucas's turn to receive his dose of professional humiliation. Whitfield, O'Brien appeared with his eternal notebook in hand. Mr. Henderson called. It seems you missed the deadline to file the response. Lucas went pale. That's impossible. The deadline is tomorrow. It was yesterday. You confused the dates. I never confuse dates. First time for everything. O'Brien walked away, leaving Lucas staring at the computer screen as if it had personally betrayed him. It happens to everyone, Madeline said, returning his words. Not to me. Until today, apparently. They looked at each other. For the first time, there was something besides competition in the look. There was recognition. Both were falling apart, and both knew it. The pressure of the last few weeks was taking its toll. Poorly slept nights, skipped meals, the constant tension of being watched. It was too much, even for the best professionals. In the middle of the afternoon, Williams called an emergency meeting. Only the partners and Margaret were present when Madeline and Lucas arrived. Sit down, Williams said, and there was something different in his tone. Genuine concern. An envelope was on the table, red, marked as maximum priority. We received an important communication, Williams began. The results of the case in Denver were significant. Madeline and Lucas exchanged a quick look. Significant how? Lucas asked. That's not relevant to you at the moment, O'Brien intervened. What is relevant is that the decision about the partnership will be accelerated. Accelerated? Madeline repeated. The announcement will be made next week. 1 week. 7 days to prove their worth. 7 days while making basic mistakes they never would have made under normal circumstances. You can go, Williams dismissed them. Outside the room, neither could speak for a moment. 1 week, Lucas finally said. 1 week, Madeline repeated. They returned to the station in silence. The rest of the afternoon was a desperate attempt to fix the morning's mistakes and not make new ones. By 6 in the evening, both were exhausted. I need air, Madeline said, standing up abruptly. She went to the co-working space's break area, a space with sofas and a coffee machine that produced something vaguely resembling the beverage. Lucas appeared 2 minutes later. Following my footsteps now? The coffee here is the only one available. Of course. They stood in silence while the machine made noises that didn't inspire confidence. Do you think we're going to lose? Madeline asked suddenly. Lose what? Everything. The position, credibility, the job. Lucas didn't respond immediately. I think we're so focused on competing with each other that we forgot about the rest. The rest being everything that actually matters. That's surprisingly philosophical coming from you. Exhaustion does that to people. Madeline took her coffee from the machine. It was horrible. She drank it anyway. About New York, she began. I already said I wasn't playing games. I know, but I never said whether I believed you or not. Lucas looked at her. And so? I want to believe. But every time I let my guard down, something happens that makes me doubt. Like Margaret's message? Like Margaret's message. Like the partners acting as if they know something we don't know. Like all of this. Do you think I'm involved in this? I think I don't know who to trust anymore. The phrase hung in the air, too heavy to be ignored. Including yourself? Lucas asked. Madeline didn't respond, because the answer was yes. We're both losing control, he said quietly. Making mistakes, doubting everything. This isn't coincidence. What are you suggesting? That maybe this is exactly what they want, to put us under pressure until we break. They who? Williams, O'Brien, whoever is behind those envelopes. Madeline considered his words. It made disturbing sense. And what do we do? Stop fighting each other, at least until we understand what's happening. Would this be a truce? This would be survival. She looked at him for a long moment. The Lucas she knew would never propose something like this. But the Lucas in front of her seemed as lost as she was. 1 week, she finally said. 1 week. It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't trust, but it was a start. That night, as she was leaving the co-working space, Madeline received a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. You don't know anything. Madeline reread the message for the 100th time. The number was unknown, impossible to trace, and the words wouldn't leave her head. The next morning, she arrived at the co-working space before everyone else. Lucas appeared 15 minutes later, deep dark circles revealing a night as bad as hers. Did you get it too? He asked without beating around the bush. The message? I did. Any idea who sent it? None. You? 0. They sat at station 27, but neither opened their laptop. There was something more urgent to resolve. We need to find out who Oliver Blackwood is, Madeline said quietly. I agree, but how? The partners made it clear they don't want questions. Then we don't ask, we investigate. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Since when are you in favor of breaking rules? Since the rules seem to exist to keep us in the dark. The plan was simple. Madeline would distract Margaret while Lucas accessed the human resources system. It wasn't ethical. It wasn't professional, and it was probably grounds for dismissal. But they were too desperate to care. Margaret, Madeline approached the assistant with her most convincing smile. Can I ask a question about the quarterly report filing procedure? Margaret looked at her with suspicion. You've never been interested in filing before. I'm trying to become a more well-rounded professional. At 8:15 in the morning? It's never too early to learn. On the other side of the room, Lucas had sat down at a computer near the administrative area. His fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. The filing is quite simple, Margaret began to explain, still suspicious. The reports are organized by date, client, and person responsible. Madeline nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm, pretending to absorb every word while watching Lucas out of the corner of her eye. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Margaret continued explaining details that Madeline would never use. And when there are multiple lawyers on the same case? She asked, inventing questions. Each one files their part separately. Fascinating. Lucas finally stood up, making a discreet signal. He had something. Thank you, Margaret. That was very enlightening. You didn't write anything down. Photographic memory. Margaret clearly didn't believe it, but Madeline was already walking away. At station 27, Lucas showed his phone screen. A photo of the employee registry. Oliver Blackwood. Senior attorney. Location Denver, Colorado. Hire date, same year as Madeline and Lucas. He joined the firm with us, Madeline said, incredulous. And nobody ever mentioned it, in 3 years. How is that possible? Look at his case history. Lucas scrolled to another photo. An impressive list. Complex cases, significant victories, high-profile clients. Everything conducted quietly, far from Chicago. He's good, Madeline admitted. He's very good, and he's competing for the same position as us. The penny finally dropped. All the competition between them, all the provocations, all the sleepless nights trying to outdo each other. And all along there was a third player they didn't even know existed. The partners knew, Lucas said. From the beginning. Of course they knew. They planned this. But why? What's the point of making us compete without knowing who we were really competing against? Madeline thought for a moment. Pressure test. They wanted to see how we would behave under extreme stress. And we fell for it perfectly. Fighting each other while the real competitor worked in peace. The silence that followed was heavy. All the rivalry of the last few months seemed absurd now. Wasted energy fighting the wrong person. I feel like a complete... Lucas stopped, looking for the right word. Fool? I was going to say something stronger, but fool works. That makes two of us then. They stood looking at Oliver Blackwood's photo. A man neither of them knew, but who would probably win the position they both wanted so much. What do we do now? Lucas asked. I don't know. For the first time, you don't have a plan? For the first time, I'm not sure of anything. Lucas leaned back in his chair and let out a humorless laugh. You know what's ironic? We spent weeks trying to destroy each other. And in the end, the enemy wasn't even in the room. Technically, you're not my enemy. I'm not? You're my rival. There's a difference. Which is? Madeline thought before answering. Enemies you want to see fail, rivals you want to overcome. But deep down, you respect them. Lucas looked at her differently. That was almost a compliment. Don't get used to it. Too late. That afternoon, Williams called another meeting, this time just Madeline and Lucas. I imagine you've already found out, he said without beating around the bush. There was no point in denying it. Oliver Blackwood, Madeline confirmed. You're more persistent than I expected. That's good. Why didn't you tell us from the beginning? Lucas asked. Because it wasn't relevant. It wasn't relevant to know who we were competing against? Williams leaned forward. You were competing against yourselves. You always were. Oliver was just an external variable. A variable who might win the position, Madeline said. Might, or might not. The decision hasn't been made yet. O'Brien, who had remained silent, finally spoke. What we observed in recent weeks was revealing. You both have extraordinary qualities, but you also have significant blind spots. Which would be? Lucas asked. You spend too much energy fighting each other. Imagine what you could achieve if you worked together. The phrase hung in the air. The announcement will be tomorrow, Williams concluded. Rest. You're going to need it. Outside, Madeline and Lucas walked in silence. Work together, he repeated. Do you think they're suggesting something? I think they're testing us until the last second. What if we just stopped playing their game? Madeline stopped walking. What do you mean? Lucas looked at her. What if, regardless of tomorrow's result, we did things differently? Before she could answer, her phone vibrated. A message from Oliver Blackwood. Congratulations on finding out. See you tomorrow. Oliver Blackwood's message still glowed on Madeline's phone screen. Lucas was beside her, both standing on the sidewalk in front of the co-working space, not knowing exactly what to do with that information. I need a drink, Madeline said. It's 6 p.m. So what? So what, I completely agree. They walked without a set destination. They passed elegant restaurants, crowded cafeterias, and bistros with lines at the door. Nothing felt right. Then they heard the music. An off-key voice singing an 80s ballad echoed from an establishment with neon lights on the facade. The sign said Lucky Voice Karaoke Bar. No, Madeline said immediately. Why not? Because it's a karaoke bar. Exactly. Drinks and free entertainment. Entertainment is a generous word for drunk people singing off-key. Do you have a better suggestion? Madeline looked around. Full restaurants, endless lines, and the prospect of a serious night discussing Oliver Blackwood. All right, but I'm not singing. Nobody asked you to sing. I'm making it clear right now. The interior of the bar was exactly what you would expect. Purple and blue lighting, a small stage in the back, screens displaying song lyrics, and a long counter where people of all types drank and watched the performances. They found 2 empty stools in the corner of the counter. Proximity was inevitable, shoulders almost touching. What'll it be? The bartender asked. Whiskey, straight, Lucas said. Gin and tonic, Madeline added. On stage, a middle-aged man was finishing an enthusiastic but painful version of a classic rock song. The audience applauded out of politeness. This is wonderful, Lucas said, genuinely amused. This is auditory suffering. You don't know how to appreciate art. This isn't art. This is a crime against music. The drinks arrived. Madeline took a generous sip and felt her shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. So, Lucas began, Oliver Blackwood. Can we not talk about that for 5 minutes? What do you want to talk about then? Anything. The weather, that gentleman's questionable vocal technique, your biggest fear. My biggest fear? It's a valid question. Lucas thought for a moment. Mediocrity. Seriously? Seriously, the idea of going through life without leaving any mark, doing everything right and still being forgotten. Madeline didn't expect such an honest answer. That's surprisingly deep for a karaoke bar. Hope the whiskey helps, and you, what's your biggest fear? She swirled the glass between her fingers, depending on someone, depending how, emotionally, financially, in any way, the idea of needing another person to be complete. That explains a lot about you. What does that mean? It means you've built very high walls, Crawford. Walls protect me. Walls also isolate. The phrase hung in the air. Madeline had no answer. On stage, a woman began singing a romantic song from the 90s. She was slightly off-key, but made up for it with dramatic enthusiasm. Is she crying? Madeline asked, grateful for the distraction. I think it's the emotion of the song. Or the alcohol. Probably both. They watched in silence for a moment. The woman finished with a scream that could be a high note or a cry for help. I used to sing in the shower, Lucas said out of nowhere. Everyone sings in the shower. No, I really sang, with choreography. Madeline almost spit out her drink. Choreography? Rehearsed moves, facial expression, the whole package. Please tell me there's a video of this. There is, and it's dying with me. That's unfair. You can't mention something like that and not show it. I can, and I will. The bartender passed by offering another round. They accepted. Karaoke time, the host shouted into the microphone. Who's the next brave one? A woman at the next table pointed directly at Lucas. This one here. He said he sings very well. Lucas's eyes widened. I didn't say anything like that. Go on, handsome, the woman insisted, clearly a few drinks beyond recommended. The audience started clapping. Madeline covered her mouth to hide her laughter. You're not going to, Lucas said to her. I'm not going to what? Make me go up on that stage. I'm not doing anything, the audience is asking. Madeline? Lucas. Is this revenge for something? This is free entertainment. You said so yourself. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, to Madeline's absolute surprise, he stood up from the stool. If I'm going to embarrass myself, at least it'll be memorable. He went up on stage to enthusiastic applause. He grabbed the microphone with a confidence Madeline didn't expect. The music started, a classic ballad, and then Lucas opened his mouth. He could sing. Not just could. He was genuinely good. His voice was steady, in tune, with an emotion that made the entire bar stop to listen. Madeline's mouth dropped open. When he finished, the applause was deafening. Lucas took an ironic bow and returned to the counter. You, Madeline said, are a box of surprises. I warned you I had choreography in the shower. There had to be some talent behind it. Why did you never mention you could sing? It never seemed relevant to office disputes. She shook her head, still processing. What else are you hiding? A lot. You'll have to find out gradually. The phrase was charged with something neither wanted to name yet. The bar continued noisy around them, but there, in that corner of the counter, there was only the two of them. Lucas extended his hand and touched hers. A simple gesture, fingers intertwined on the worn wood of the counter. Madeline looked at their joined hands, then at him. This is a terrible idea, she said quietly. Probably. We work together. Technically, we compete together. Tomorrow we'll find out who won the position. I know, but neither let go of the other's hand. I want to kiss you, Lucas said simply, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. Madeline's heart raced. The noise of the bar disappeared. Here? She asked. Is there a better place? She should pull back. Think about the consequences. Remember all the reasons why this would complicate everything. Instead, she leaned in. The kiss started soft, hesitant, as if both still expected the other to pull back. When that didn't happen, it became deeper, years of tension dissolving in a single moment. Someone in the bar whistled. They ignored it. When they separated, Madeline was breathless. This complicates everything, she said. I know. And tomorrow? Lucas held her face tenderly. Tomorrow we'll find out. Together. They left the bar holding hands. On the sidewalk, he kissed her again. Without hesitation. That night, Madeline lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She was in love with Lucas Whitfield. And for the first time, that didn't seem like a problem. It felt like the beginning of something. Madeline woke up to the sound of rain hitting the window. Chicago's sky was gray, heavy, as if it knew this day would be decisive. She lay there for a few minutes, mentally reviewing everything that had happened. The bar, the karaoke, the kiss. Lucas Whitfield had kissed her, and she'd kissed back. And today, in a few hours, they would find out who would win the partner position. Her phone vibrated. A message from him. "Sleep well?" She smiled before responding. "No. You?" "Me neither. See you at the office." The office, not the co-working space. The renovation had finished 2 days earlier, and everyone had returned to the main building. It seemed appropriate that the announcement would happen there, where it all began. Madeline got ready carefully. She didn't know why she was nervous. It wasn't just about the position. It was about everything that would come after. When she arrived at the office, Lucas was already in the lobby. He wore the same suit from the first day, the one she had deliberately wet with water. The irony didn't go unnoticed. "Nice suit," she said. "Thank you. It survived a water attack a few weeks ago." "Accidents happen." "Of course they do." They smiled, the kind of smile that carries history. The elevator went up in silence. When the doors opened, Margaret Collins was waiting. "The meeting starts in 10 minutes. Main conference room." "Thank you, Margaret," Madeline said, "and congratulations to you both, regardless of the result." The phrase was strange. Margaret was never this nice. The conference room was full. All the firm's lawyers, assistants, interns, Williams and O'Brien sitting at the head. And beside them, a man Madeline recognized immediately. Oliver Blackwood. He was younger than she imagined. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, confident posture, without being arrogant. He seemed like the type of person you would respect, even if you wanted not to like him. "Thank you all for being here," Williams began. "This is an important moment for the firm. After months of careful evaluation, we have reached a decision about the new partnership position." Madeline felt Lucas move subtly closer. His shoulder touched hers. A small touch, but significant. "We evaluated not only professional results," O'Brien continued, "but also adaptability, work under pressure, and collaboration skills." Collaboration. The word echoed in Madeline's mind. "All candidates demonstrated exceptional qualities," Williams said. "Crawford and Whitfield in particular surprised us with their evolution throughout the process." Evolution. It was an elegant way of saying they had stopped trying to destroy each other. However, O'Brien adjusted his glasses, the partner position requires a specific profile, someone who combines technical excellence with long-term strategic vision. Madeline held her breath. "Therefore, we are pleased to announce that the new partner of Williams, O'Brien and Associates, is Oliver Blackwood." Polite applause filled the room. Oliver stood up, thanked them with a brief, professional nod. Madeline expected to feel anger, frustration, injustice, but she felt none of that. She looked at Lucas. He looked back at her. And in that moment, without words, they understood the same thing. They had lost the position, but they hadn't lost. The meeting went on for a few more minutes. Speeches about the firm's future, expansion plans, generic thanks. Madeline barely heard any of it. When it finally ended, she stood up and walked toward the exit. Lucas followed her. Crawford, Whitfield. It was Oliver Blackwood. They stopped. "I wanted to introduce myself formally," he said, extending his hand, "and say that you two were worthy adversaries." "Thank you," Madeline replied, shaking his hand. "Congratulations on the achievement." "Well deserved," Lucas added without sarcasm. Oliver smiled. "If it's any consolation, the partner spoke very highly of you. They said they'd never seen such a competitive pair transform into something so functional." "Functional," Madeline repeated. "That's a word. It's the word they used. I would have chosen another." "Which one?" "Interesting." He walked away, leaving the word hanging in the air. Madeline and Lucas left the office in silence. Outside, the rain had increased. Thick drops fell on the sidewalk, creating puddles that reflected the lights from the buildings. "And now?" Lucas asked. "Now we get wet." She went down the steps and walked into the rain, without an umbrella, without protection. The water soaked her hair, her blazer, everything. Lucas watched her for a moment, then did the same thing. "This is crazy," he said, rain running down his face. "Probably." "We lost the position." "We did. And you're smiling." Madeline realized it was true. She was smiling. "I think I'm relieved," she admitted. "Relieved? Not having to pretend anymore, not having to compete, being able to simply be." Lucas moved closer. Rain fell between them, but the distance decreased. "What do you want to be?" he asked. "I don't know yet, but I know who I want to find out with." He held her face. Raindrops ran down his fingers, her chin, everything. This is still a terrible idea, he said. The worst. We're going to regret it. Probably not. How do you know? Because some things you just know. He kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss at the bar. That one had been a discovery. This was a certainty. The rain kept falling. People passed by with umbrellas, casting curious glances. None of that mattered. When they separated, both were soaked and smiling. What do we do now? Madeline asked. First, we find a dry place. And then, Lucas looked at the office building. Then at her. Then, we build something of our own. The phrase hung in the rain like a promise. Madeline took his hand. Then let's start. They walked together down the wet sidewalk, leaving the office behind. They didn't know exactly where they were going, but for the first time that didn't seem like a problem. It felt like an adventure. The rain had turned Chicago streets into small rivers, and Madeline and Lucas walked without a set destination, hands intertwined, smiling like two people who had finally stopped fighting against the obvious. My apartment is 2 blocks away, Lucas said. We can dry off there. That sounds like a convenient excuse. It is a convenient excuse, but it's also true. Madeline pretended to consider. All right, but only because I'm freezing. Of course, only because of that. Lucas's apartment was exactly what she expected and nothing like she imagined at the same time. Organized, but with personality. Shelves full of books, a guitar leaning in the corner that she never knew he played, and a view of the city that sparkled even through the rain. You play guitar? She asked, pointing at the instrument. Badly, but I like to try. First karaoke, now guitar. How many secret talents do you have? You'll have to stick around to find out. He disappeared down a hallway and came back with 2 towels and a t-shirt. I don't have women's clothes, but this should work for you to dry off. Madeline took the t-shirt. It was gray, soft, and clearly had been worn many times. Your favorite? How do you know? It's faded. People keep faded things out of affection, not necessity. Lucas smiled. You're very observant. I pay attention to things that matter. The phrase carried more weight than the word suggested. Madeline went to the bathroom to change clothes. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw a version of herself she didn't completely recognize. Wet hair, smudged makeup, and a smile she couldn't contain. Lucas's t-shirt was too big, falling to mid-thigh. It smelled like fabric softener and something she could only describe as him. When she returned to the living room, she found Lucas in the kitchen, preparing something on the stove. He had also changed clothes, sweatpants and a simple t-shirt. What are you doing? She asked. Hot chocolate? Universal remedy for rainy nights. You cook too? Hot chocolate doesn't count as cooking. It counts to me. He served 2 mugs and handed one to her. Madeline wrapped her hands around the hot ceramic, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers. They went to the couch. The rain continued beating on the windows, creating a soft melody that filled the silence between them. Can I tell you something? Lucas said. You're full of confessions today. This one's important. Then tell me. He looked at the mug, then at her. On the first day at the co-working space, when you spilled water on me, I was angry. Really angry. I know, you spilled juice on me as revenge. But it wasn't just anger. It was admiration. Nobody had ever confronted me like that, without fear, without backing down. That impressed you? More than I wanted to admit. Madeline put the mug on the coffee table. You want to know when I knew I was in trouble? When? When you went up on that karaoke stage and sang like it was the most natural thing in the world. You had nothing to prove, but you did it anyway. For fun? For courage. And that completely disarmed me. Lucas placed his mug next to hers. The space between them on the couch had decreased without either of them noticing. Madeline. Lucas. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. With work, with our careers. I don't either. But I know what I want now. What? To stay here, with you, without thinking about anything else. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she moved closer and rested her head on his shoulder. Lucas put his arm around her, pulling her closer. They stayed like that for a long moment, the rain outside, the warmth between them. Stay, he said. Stay here. I didn't bring anything. You don't need anything. Lucas, no expectations, no pressure, just stay. She lifted her head and looked at him. In his eyes, she saw everything she needed to see. Affection, respect, patience. All right, she said. I'll stay. He smiled. That smile she had hated for so long and now couldn't imagine living without. Later, lying in his bed, Madeline with her head on Lucas's chest, listening to his heart beat in a steady rhythm, she thought about how strange life was. 6 months later, Madeline still couldn't believe what she was seeing. The gold plaque on the door said, Crawford and Whitfield Law. Elegant letters, navy blue background, installed exactly 15 minutes ago by the same technician who was now gathering his tools in the hallway. It's crooked, Lucas said, tilting his head. It's not crooked. Yes, it is. Look at the right corner. The right corner is perfect. You're being biased because you chose the font. I chose the font because you wanted to use Comic Sans. It was a joke. It didn't seem like a joke. The technician looked from one to the other, clearly confused about whether this was a fight or a normal conversation. He decided it wasn't his problem, took the payment, and left. Welcome to our office, Lucas said, opening the door with a dramatic gesture. The space was small. 2 desks, a meeting room that also functioned as a break room, and a window that looked out onto an alley. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't imposing. It didn't have a lake view or a marble reception. It was perfect. We need plants, Madeline said, looking around. Plants die. Not if you take care of them. I can barely take care of myself. That's why you have me now. Lucas smiled and put his arm around her waist. That's true. My survival rate has improved considerably. They had resigned from Williams, O'Brien and Associates on the same day. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the result of weeks of conversation, planning, and a growing certainty that they wanted to build something of their own. The partner's reaction was surprising. Are you sure? Williams had asked. Absolutely, Madeline replied. It's a risky decision. The market is competitive. So are we, Lucas said. Williams observed them for a long moment. Then, something like respect appeared on his face. You'll go far. Together, it was the closest to a blessing they would get from him. Now, standing in the middle of the empty office, Madeline felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Any regrets? Lucas asked. Not at all. You? Only that we didn't do this sooner. Madeline's phone vibrated. A message from Margaret Collins. Envelope for you at the building reception. They looked at each other. Envelope? Lucas frowned. We haven't even officially started yet. Maybe it's advertising. Advertising doesn't come in a mysterious envelope. They went down together. The doorman handed them a brown envelope with the Williams, O'Brien and Associates logo. Back in the office, Madeline opened it carefully. Inside, a formal letter and a contract. She read it silently, then summarized for Lucas. Institutional partnership proposal. Case referrals, access to their client network, first-year support. In exchange for what? Exclusivity in some areas. Percentage of fees. Lucas whistled softly. That's tempting. Madeline reread the terms. It was a generous offer, financial security, guaranteed clients, and chains. Subtle, elegant, but still chains. No, she said. No, we didn't leave there to stay tied to their system. Lucas took the contract from her hands. They're offering stability. They're offering control disguised as partnership. Are you sure? Madeline looked at him, at the plaque on the door, at the small office that was completely theirs. We didn't get here to do things the safe way. We got here to do things our way. Lucas smiled, that smile she knew so well now. That's the Madeline Crawford I know. He tore the contract in half, then in 4. He threw the pieces in the trash. Done. Decision made. No regrets? None. Madeline moved closer and kissed him, a light kiss, full of promise. Then let's begin, she said. Where do we start? At the beginning, one client at a time, one case at a time. Sounds like hard work. Sounds right. And it was. Finally, everything felt right. 2 rivals who became partners. 2 stubborn people who learned to give in. 2 hearts that found in conflict the most unlikely path to love. Madeline and Lucas traded certainty for uncertainty. And you? If you had $1 million proposal in hand, but it took away your freedom, would you sign or tear up the contract? Comment freedom or stability. Tell me here in the comments if you've ever lived a romance with someone you couldn't stand at first. Until the next story.